New Testament is a fascinating collection of books. And often when we think of the Bible, we think of the Bible as one book. It's actually a library of books. And so when we look at the New Testament and we look at the different groupings of books, like you have Gospels and the book of Acts and a bunch of letters, we end with this wild book, the craziest of all of them. It's the book of Revelation. And so I want to share with you a little bit of how we read the book of Revelation, because honestly, out of any of the books in the Bible, if you're going to open it and start reading it, it's gonna blow your mind. There's gonna be things that, one, it's gonna make it wildly interesting because there's like dragons and battles and attacks and all kinds of things. But also it's gonna raise some questions like, what are we supposed to actually make of this? And so I want to read a couple things for you. The first thing is really a simple thing that I want it to center us when we understand the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verse 7, it says this. It says, "Behold, I am coming soon. Blessed is he who keeps the words of the prophecy in this book." So the book of Revelation is written by a man named John, and John has a vision from Jesus. And in this vision, he writes down all of these things he sees, and they're wild things. And so what he says, though, here in verse 7, he is quoting Jesus when Jesus says, "Behold, I'm coming soon." That's what the whole book is about. And so there are a lot of bad ideas people have about the book of Revelation. One of those ideas is being that it's meant to be scary and terrifying. In fact, if you read the book of Revelation and you are afraid, you're reading it the wrong way. Because the whole book is about that statement from Jesus, "Behold, I'm coming soon." And he's coming soon because he is good, because he is loving, because he is kind, because he wants best for you. And so in all of the things, in all of the imagery, and all of the metaphors, and all the pictures, it's not meant to freak you out. It's actually meant to give you hope. It's meant to be a book filled with peace, a book that's going to make you feel comforted in the fact of who Jesus is and what he's promised to do. Now, what makes Revelation more challenging than most of the books in the Bible, it fits in this category of literature called apocalyptic literature, which I know it's a big word. Apocalypse means revealing, or it means a revelation. So what's interesting about these is happened a couple different places. It was common in the day of Jesus in ancient Jewish literature. Parts of the book of Daniel is actually apocalyptic literature. The way that it works is it's actually written using imagery and metaphors and code. And so often what will happen is somebody's writing about something happening in their day and their age and the events, that it's using like code language. So it'd be like John is writing using codes that's referencing the emperor at the time, and they all know that, but it doesn't actually say that. And so the book is filled with all of these codes of things that may not make a lot of sense when we read it now in 2024 or whenever you're watching this. But if you understood the first century context, you would understand, oh, he's trying to point to something. And so what that needs to help you when you read the book is you shouldn't read the book of Revelation like it's a timeline of the end times. Like if you go through and you start to say, oh, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then a dragon's going to eat a baby, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and then there's going to be a beast with a mark 666 on things. Like if you start to read it that way, you're going to take all these things literally. That John never actually meant you to take it literally. John wanted to use this coded language that could subtly reference something that was anti the ways of the world, that he could offer the hope of Jesus when they are living in a time when they are persecuted and hurting in their following of Jesus. And so there are a lot of bad teachings then that come out of the book of Revelation. A lot of people don't actually read the book the way it was meant to be read. And so some examples of those things, some people will predict the end of the world. In fact, almost every year there's a prediction that the world's going to end, that it's going to be 12-12-12, or it's going to be 12-31-23 because it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or and when it went from 99 to 2000, your parents might be able to tell you the world was going to end then. Over and over again, people are predicting that the world's going to end, and they'll even open up to the book of Revelation. They'll say, oh, it says here, and here is the wars and the famines and all these things it's talking about. The problem is they don't actually understand what the Bible's trying to say. In fact, in Matthew, it says no one knows the day or the time or the hour. No one knows. And so if anybody ever wants to make a bet with you that the world's going to end, take that bet. Because one, if they happen to be right, which they wouldn't because no one knows the day or the time, but if they're right, the world ends. If they're wrong, you win the bet. You get the collect on the price. And so one, there's a lot of bad teachings of things like that. There's bad teachings suggesting that maybe Jesus is going to return secretly, that Jesus is going to he'll secretly return, he'll take all the Christians will disappear, and people will try to figure out where they have gone, and then there'll be this period of waiting. Now that comes from a misreading of certain literal words that are used in the book of Revelations and other places, words like rapture. The way that the teaching actually suggests, though, is that Jesus isn't returning secretly. Jesus is going to come back, and it's not going to be secret. It's going to be a reappearing where he returns and he restores all of his creation. There's also things like the mark of the beast. I've heard thousands of theories, maybe not thousands, but I've heard so many theories about what the mark of the beast would be. And people at times have talked about it's going to be credit cards, or it's going to be microchips that get placed in your skin. When in reality, it's more likely that John is writing in such a way that people who read it would understand he's referring to something in their own time, in their own day, in their own world. I want to read you, just so you can get a sense of the way this language kind of works, the wild things that are in here. I want to read you a bit and give you some insight into it. It says this: "Then I saw another beast," John's talking about his vision, "coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. He exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And he performed great and miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. Because of the signs he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth. He ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that it could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666. Now, I read this as an example because John is not talking about a literal beast at a certain point that comes. He's talking about what the beast is referred to all throughout the scriptures, that there is language and metaphors and imagery referring to the enemy as the beast or the Satan. And so what he is describing here is not a literal way of what the enemy does, but that the enemy has come and he tries to fight against and steal Jesus' worship in order to have that for himself. In fact, what's interesting, in the first century, in order to buy and sell goods, there was actually a time when the emperor at the time required that in order for people to buy and sell goods and come into the town, they would have to have a mark. And the mark was referred to by the people at the time as a mark of the beast. And so the only way they could buy or sell or have their way of living was to take a mark called the mark of the beast. And so John is referencing, saying, all right, some have tried to demand and steal the worship that belongs to Jesus alone. And I've come to tell you, don't receive that mark. Don't follow the beast. Don't follow the ways of the world. Follow Jesus instead. And so all of this then points to, ultimately, the book of Revelation is about the end of the story. And the end of the story isn't blood and violence and destruction. In fact, it talks about some of those things because there has always been a battle going on, a battle between good and evil, a battle between heaven and earth, a battle between Jesus and the Satan. That battle has been going on for all eternity. And so what happens then in the end, Revelation tells the end of the story that Jesus wins. And that when Jesus returns, the very end of the book is a lot like the beginning. In the beginning, it all starts in the garden, and it's good. The end of the book is a garden in a city, and it is all good. What's fascinating to me is often I think of the end of our stories as humans as the end is heaven. The reality in the book of Revelation, the end is not heaven, the end is earth. That God creates a new heavens and a new earth, that God restores all of his creation. In a sense, God puts it all back the way it's supposed to be. That we are reunited with our bodies, that our bodies are made whole, that all of creation is made good, and we live in a perfect relationship with God the way he intended from the very beginning. That's what the book of Revelation wants to point us to. And it wants to remind us that we are waiting. And so it will call out things, that there are things happening that remind us that we're in the end days. Because we are waiting for Jesus to reappear, just like the disciples did. As soon as Jesus left, they were waiting. and expecting Jesus would come back because he said he would. And Jesus will come back. He said he would. And when he does, he gives us hope that he puts all the things back together and restores things to the way they actually should be.